I spent most of my undergrad drinking wine and watching CSI on VHS rented from Blockbuster, which you can't do anymore. And I was definitely not one of those university students who was a member of every club and who had started 5 businesses by the time they were 21. So now I see all these young startup founders who have had 4 businesses by the time they graduate high school, and they really inspire me. I got into startups much later after my first full-time job, and definitely was lazed about a lot during my university days. I run 2 companies. I do a lot of speaking on the side, and I'm an advisor to a few companies. So for me, the key is keeping myself organized, keeping my schedule organized, and making sure that I'm using my time as effectively as I can. There's not as much lazing about and watching of CSI lately, but I definitely also carve out time for friends and family on weekends, because I think one mistake that entrepreneurs make is not taking time to relax and focus on wellness and to recharge on weekends. So yes, to me, the key is all about organization. Yeah, so Gary Vee and I actually go way back. When I worked at a startup called Sprouter, which was an entrepreneur social network, he actually spoke at one of our events in New York City, and then we did his book launch event in London, England. So Gary Vee and I are BFFs, or at least we were back in 2008. And the thing that I love about Gary is that he's so authentic. Since I met him 8 years ago, he's been talking about the same message, this message of really hustling, of working hard. There's no secret to success. It's just hard work. He's not smarter than anyone. He's not better than anyone. He just works the hardest and puts in the most heart to his business. And it's been amazing to see how much he scaled it. When I met him, he was just running Wine Library TV, not just, but that's what he was doing full time. And since then, he's launched VaynerMedia and grown it into this huge company and influencer talent management arm of it, and written many books. And now he's a sought after speaker who charges, I don't even know what to speak. And it's amazing to see how he's grown his brand, but still maintain that authenticity to his core message, which is, I'm not better than you, I just work a lot harder than you, and you can be in my shoes if you do the same thing. So I have always been a huge Oprah fan. And when she was launching her network OWN in Canada, I tweeted kind of a cheeky tweet, you know how she gave away all the cars and said, everybody gets a car. So I tweeted, OWN launches in Canada today, everybody gets OWN. And she retweeted it, took out that part at the end where I kind of, made fun of her, and then added a comment. And I started, it was almost like, I would assume this is what it's like to tweet when you're Justin Bieber. All of a sudden my Twitter feed was flooded with people following me and replying and asking if I could introduce them to Oprah, and it was crazy. And then she tweeted something shortly after, like an hour later, about a new show that was premiering that night on OWN Canada, and added my @ name to the end of it, as if I was her BFF in Canada who she wanted to make sure watched that show that night. So needless to say, I did about 0 work that day because I was too busy calling my mom to tell her I was retweeted by Oprah, and now it's kind of a fun claim to fame. I always try to remind people when I tell them about my story that I've had some massive failures, and that every failure presents a learning opportunity, so to not be afraid of them and to try to learn from them instead of being fearful. So my first one was when I worked at that startup Sprouter, the entrepreneurial social network, we actually ended up shutting down because we ran out of runway for investment. And so that was a really hard time for our founder and a really hard time for our team because we were so passionate about the vision. And Postmedia actually acquired the company and kind of brought us back to life, and we went to work internally there, which is where we launched BetaKit, the startup publication. And about 2 years after that, they laid our entire team off because obviously media is going through a bit of a troubling time, and they needed to cut costs. And I think the thing that got me through both of those situations was the power of my network. I'm a big proponent for building your personal brand, building your network, going to events, shaking hands, giving back to the community, and that was what really made me sit back after I was laid off and see it as an opportunity to reevaluate and think about what I wanted to do next, and not as a crisis, because I knew when I figured out what I wanted to do next and I put the word out to my network, I'd have all of these great people helping me with meetings or introductions or recommendations. And that's the power of a strong network, and something I encourage every new grad or student to be focused on now. Build your network, keep it warm, so that when something bad does happen, whether it's your company shutting down, a layoff, a personal crisis, whatever that might be, you know that you have your network to fall back on.